Okay, today we are in part 4 of 5 faculties for effective prayer. Today we're talking about will. We are praying all the time, and we are exercising all 5 of our faculties all of the time. And the faculties are imagination, faith, judgment, will, and elimination. And we're doing all of these things all the time. And we're not always thinking about doing them. But we are using all of these faculties all the time. And the key to doing it properly is to be aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it, how we're using, first of all, to recognize these faculties, and then how we are exercising them. There's a lot of interesting things going on in our life. We have, I was looking at, kind of revisiting one of the illustrations that I used in my book, The Complete Soul, about the age of the soul. And I have been saying that we do not evolve, that the soul is complete now, and use the illustration of taking a pitcher of water, and you know how old water is, right? Old water, about 4.5 billion years old. That's a kind of an interesting thought. You can buy 4.5 billion year old object in a cheap water bottle. But they say all water that we drink and have, that we see and experience is original. I don't know if that's true, but we'll assume it is. But you have a pitcher of water and you pour it into a glass. Say we did this a year ago. You have a glass of water that is born a year ago. A year later, you take another glass and you fill it with water from that same pitcher. Now you have a glass of water that's a year old and you have one that was just born. So on one level, you have a timeline. You have birthdays. And you have periods of time that pass. But if the water in the pitcher is 4.5 billion years old, how old is the water in each glass? It's also 4.5 billion years old, so it doesn't age, or it maintains the same age as the source. So when we're talking about the soul, we're talking about there was poured into our being, as our being, some water from a timeless, infinite source. And we all have different birthdays. I don't think any of us have the same birthdays. Different birth years, but our soul is the same age. If you compare it to the water, it doesn't age, it doesn't change. And water is made up of H2O, it's hydrogen, oxygen. We're made up of the same stuff that God is. And so the water in each glass doesn't age or it doesn't evolve. It is the same as the source, always. And of course, you can get into all kinds of intellectual arguments about, well, it may stagnate, it may do this or may do that, it may, change in some way. You might get moss in the glass or whatever, but let's not go there. Muddy the water, so to speak. Because that doesn't happen in spirit. It doesn't happen with the soul. And there are different kinds of glasses. You could pour water into 10 different kinds of glasses, and you've got different appearances, you've got different nationalities, different skin colors, different cultures. But there's still one water, and it's still the same stuff, and it's still the same age. It doesn't matter when that being came into being. And so we think from that perspective, what we are trying to do on the spiritual path is wake up to that timeless reality, that water that we are, that soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter what you call it. And to get over this idea that I have to grow somehow spiritually, the glass of water would acknowledge or would realize, well, I don't know about that, but just imagine that it says this water, was poured into me. There's a difference in the glass and the water. There's a difference in the soul and the body. The body is the glass. The body does change. The body does evolve. The body does go through different kinds of experiences. And the body was born at a certain time. We have a birth date. We have a time of day that we were born. And we'll have a time that we die. And that'll be marked on our tombstone if we have one of those. But there is something in us that does not ever change, that does not ever age, that does not grow, because it doesn't need to grow. Does the water need to grow? Does the water in the second glass need to do something to make itself as good as the water in the first glass? Because the water in the first glass has another extra year of experience? It's all the same. We talk about oneness and we talk about unity. This illustration helps us get our minds around that idea. The water is what's one, not the glass. We try on a physical level to declare oneness with humanity, with all the other glasses that are running around. And there will always be differences. But at the soul level, we are of the same stuff. We are spiritual beings expressing through these vehicles that we call the bodies. And we are all influenced by our cultures, by the kind of body we're in, the family we grew up through, all the various things. But when the Bible talks about the Lord God being one God, the Lord God being one, monotheism, single God idea, that's what we're talking about. One big pitcher of water being poured into a lot of glasses. And there's no change when that occurs. The change that occurs is what goes on in the mind of the glass. And that is how the glass perceives itself. And basically, glasses run around thinking that they are the reality. When they say I'm half full, I'm half empty, I'm half whatever, they're speaking of the glass. The I is attached to the glass. But the person who is spiritually awake attaches the I to the water. That's the I am. That's the changeless center, the changeless reality. And so as we get into this idea of will, it's a pretty interesting subject. If we think of the way as taught by Jesus, aligning with the way of Taoism, the natural flow of the universe, we see a new layer of meaning in at least two familiar passages from the New Testament. In the Lord's Prayer, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." Thy will be done is an affirmation of the way. This natural unseen flow through the material aspect of our life. In our modern vernacular, we might simply say, go with the flow or don't push the river. The will of God is absolute freedom. That is, it knows no restrictions whatsoever. And I've said 1,000 times, you desire to be free. because at the spiritual level you are already free. We are desiring to outpicture that which is true already at the soul level. But where do we dwell most of the time? Our identity is centered around the glass. And we have come to believe that we are not spiritually complete, that there is something lacking in us because we do not experience the water. We don't experience the pure nature of what we are at the spiritual level. And we will look at different examples like Jesus or other spiritual gurus and say, boy, I have a long way to go, because they sound so wise. And they probably don't ever have any problems like I do. And so we define ourselves as incomplete. And because we don't feel this ecstasy of spiritual awareness, we think that our soul is not completely developed, but it is. And what must evolve is that awareness of that pure water, that pure spirit that is within us. It's also interesting that we have two kinds of science that are in operation now. We have quantum physics and we have Newtonian physics. And Newtonian physics is the one we're all familiar with. Mainly it's the gravity thing and all the physical laws and stuff that we build airplanes by, and all of those kinds of things that are very useful, very important. Quantum mechanics or quantum physics deals more with the soul. Is probably the vehicle through which we will be able to better understand the spiritual dimension. And I don't understand a lot of what I read in quantum mechanics or quantum physics, but once in a while it breaks through and I get glimmers of what they're talking about, and many of the near-death researchers are referring to several of the concepts in quantum physics to explain how could a 3-year-old boy remember he was a fighter pilot in World War II and was shot down and died, and came back as a little boy and remembered the airplane that he flew, remembered the name of the ship that he was on, remembered 3 of his best friends, was taken back to a reunion of that particular ship and met the 2 friends that he knew as a young man. And many of the facts that he pointed out, nobody believed at first, but they were all proven to be true. What is it that went from that young man, 21-year-old man, I think, that was shot down in that airplane, to the 3-year-old boy? What traveled? There's nothing in Newtonian physics that can explain that. So we have to get into quantum physics to even hope to get close to explaining that. And I personally don't need an explanation. I don't have to have it, but it's always interesting to hear when people go into that kind of area, experts go into that kind of area and speculate on how that could happen. But it's the same question we would ask ourselves when we look in the mirror. Who is that that's doing the looking? Who am I? What am I? And we look at the glass, we look at the body, we see it's aging, we see it's changing. But this I somehow is not. So we've got these 2 kinds of math, and also there's 2 kinds of cosmology. There's what many scientists are saying is no longer valid. It was called the steady state. Most scientists accepted the universe as always having been before the Big Bang theory came out. That was called the steady state. It had always been, had no beginning, no end. And then the Big Bang comes out and we have a beginning. And theoretically we have an ending. That's 2 perspectives. And when you think about the spiritual level, that would be the steady state. It never changes, has no beginning, no end. The Big Bang has a beginning and has an end. That's the material side. And so that level of physics applies to the physical. And so much of our thinking is there because science shifted from basically a spiritual basis to a materialistic basis. And they explain everything in terms of materialism. They're called physicalists or materialists. And that's the dominant science that we have today. Medical students go through their training with that understanding that the body is a machine that gets broken and has to be fixed. Just like we took Beth's car in because the window decided to drop down inside the door, had a mechanical problem. And that's how often we are treated as physical bodies. We go to a doctor and we had a window that dropped a little bit and got to lift it up, put it back in place, fix it. But what is it that causes that body to walk into the doctor's office, that thinks about things, and that who is the I of that? It's a different level. But we're so into the physical that we forget the spiritual. And so we are living in two different worlds, basically. And for the most part, we're living in the material world. That's where most of our attention is. So when we think of will, we think of it on a material level often. But there is always this pressing forth. The water is trying to say to the glass, I'm the reality here. I'm the one that changes forever, or does not change forever. The glass will come and go, but the water will remain. And that's, we don't think that way necessarily. We think in terms of time and space, and that's useful. We don't want to just deny that. But when we speak of will, this is going on all the time. God's will on earth as it is in heaven, that is a profound affirmation. It's saying, let this reality show forth in my life as it is on the spiritual dimension, in the spiritual level. Let this inner reality that is God, is my soul, come forth into my life, on earth as it is in heaven. It's a profound affirmation. Let thy will be done. That's not a negative thing. It's a very positive letting go and letting this natural flow happen. In the context of the soul, the meaning of will aligns with volition, the commitment to a particular course of action and direction. It is a willingness to allow for a desired good or something better. Again, in Gethsemane, when Jesus prayed 3 times that this cup be removed, he concluded with, let thy will, not mine, be done. It's like the seed that is about to be dropped in the ground and says, no, I don't want to be dropped in the ground. I'm happy just like I am. I'm happy with my seed self. But we know that if we drop the seed in the ground, as Jesus said, you drop it in the ground, it will die, but it has to die for something more to come out. And what that really means is we have to die to the glass consciousness, the container consciousness. We begin to let that go, realizing that there's water in us, that we are something more than this glass and this container. And so when Jesus was saying, let thy will, not mine, be done, he's saying, like the seed would say, okay, I don't know what's going to happen here, but I trust that something greater will unfold. And it has to be dropped into the ground and die. And really, that's the whole death and resurrection concept. It's based on the seed. It's based on growth we see every place. One thing dies, so something else is born. Something else comes forth. and it's something greater because it produces more as the result. So to say, let thy will be done, that's an excellent affirmation to apply in our own life if we're at a crossroad where we don't know what's coming next. Thy will is being done. Let's say that. We say, thy will is being done, knowing that maybe my plan's not working out, but the plan of the divine is. And so I'm open and receptive to that. And when you look at the Jesus story, what if he had walked away from the crucifixion? I mean, just put all that in perspective. Take it as a story. What if the seed was not dropped in the ground? It would never produce fruit. That's the whole idea. It's like if we go with the will of the seed, nothing happens. If we go with the will of our little perception, of our body-based perception, nothing happens. But if we say, okay, I don't know what's happening here, but something does. Something knows. And that is that intelligence within me, that spirit within me. We exercise the faculty of will as our means of keeping the picturing aspect of the imagination properly focused, our faith directed to spiritual wholeness, and our judgment functioning at a higher level. Keeping the imagination focused, I'm using my will to do that. And what is that picture that I'm holding of my life? Is it falling apart or is it falling together? I've got that choice. And how am I using my imagination? Our faith directed where's our faith directed? In the spiritual wholeness of the situation, of my life, of whatever's going on? Or am I focused on something bad is happening? Is that where my faith is? I'm going to go over the edge of this cliff. And judgment, same thing. Am I judging this as a good thing happening, or am I judging it as something bad? And so that's how I exercise my will. I look at how I'm using my faculties, and am I willing to change my focus? And we have that ability, but you have to use your other faculties, the imagination. You've got to be willing to lift up your eyes and see the fields all ready for harvest. All these things work together. Faith is in the greater good, not in the destruction. And my judgment is this is not falling apart. It's being put together in a way that I could never imagine. That I have not imagined, I should say. So it's an act of will to keep those faculties aimed in the right direction, focused in the right direction. And how do I know I'm doing that? I just look at how I feel. If I feel all tense about it, they're focused in a negative direction. Am I willing to refocus, to change? And you don't have to know the answers. That's the important thing to remember. We don't have to know what's around the next corner. Because actually, you'll never get to the next corner. You're always here in this now moment. This is where you live. This is where I live. And it's we're always trying to escape the now because we're trying to figure out the future. But what if we live in the now? What if we say, thy will is being done, and I'm willing to go with that flow. I'm willing to follow that way. We exercise the will when we rein in negative thinking and emotion that has been carried away by challenging appearances. You know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about. I'm an expert at that. It's so easy to get carried away by appearances in a negative way. We become willing to look beyond immediate circumstances and consider different possibilities. The soul has but one desire, and that is its commitment to freedom of expression without limits. That's why I believe we made the choice to come here, to come into a body that is by nature limited. Because if you can experience limitless in a body, you've got it. you can understand, you can do about anything. And I think that's what Jesus, why he said, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe you've received it. He didn't put any limits on it, or say to this mountain, be cast up and thrown into the sea. That whatever you put your faith in, whatever you're willing to believe, can be a reality for you, can be your truth. And that's, from one level of thought, is a very difficult thing to grasp. But what if it's true? And if it's not true, why are we doing this whole spiritual thing in the first place? Just making ourselves feel better? Or is there some truth to what we're talking about? Our desire to reconnect with the soul is prompted by this internal call of freedom. Let thy will be done, then, is the highest form of prayer when directed to the soul. Follow this with the acknowledgement that thy will is being done on earth, that is, in expression, as it is in heaven, the unseen realm of the soul. Affirm your willingness to let go and trust that greater good is now naturally unfolding through your life. You see, I think this church, it's designed to be a teaching institution. And right now it may be giving us one of our best lessons that we've ever had. That occurred to me, and it's just like, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. But, the smooth sea never made a good sailor. Remember that saying? So this is not a storm. This is part of the movement forward. And this church is teaching us that. It's showing us that. And I can't wait to see what's around that next corner, but I'm going to be here now in the meantime. All right. Thank you for coming out, and just keep coming out. Keep doing it.
Even though this instrument only has 5 holes that the air comes through, compared to what the silver flute has, it can still make beautiful music too. So just thinking of that. So here's a song. just gonna make it up, and I think I said earlier, with Native American flutes, you can just make it up, and there are no mistakes. That's the best part.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.